Check 1, 2.
Go! Curious about real estate? Yes! Then you've come to the right place. Get the knowledge you need. Get over the fear and get started. This is the Michael Quarles Real Estate Show with your host, Michael Quarles.
We are pleased today to welcome Michael Quarles. Michael Quarles started investing when he was still a teenager, buying a lot and constructing a duplex even though he wasn't quite sure what he was doing. He has been involved in nearly 1,000 real estate deals. In 2005, he did 200 deals, and people started asking him how he did so many deals, and he began helping new and seasoned investors jumpstart their marketing and formed YellowLetters.com. YellowLetters.com has become the nation's leader in direct mail marketing for real estate investors. He has also opened the Buy, Fix, Flip Academy, which is dedicated to helping investors succeed in real estate investment business. Michael, welcome to the Invest Florida Show.
Thank you. I'm enjoying being here. It's going to be fun.
Michael, thanks so much for joining us. You know, I've been following you on a number of other related types of news media, and have been really intrigued about how you got started. You really are a marketing expert. So what brought you into the real estate game?
Gosh, it was so much luck and naivety. I had this, when we're teenagers, literally, we have these S's on our chest. We think we're Superman. And can't do anything wrong, and we don't know what we're doing anyway. And,
right.
I enlisted in the Air Force, and I was waiting for my enlist date, and I opened up the newspaper, which, I at that time, I'm not a regular reader of the newspaper, so I must have been bored, and went to the classified section. I found this lot that was being advertised. It said R2, and I thought, well, I have no clue what that meant, but that sounded exciting. And ended up meeting the real estate agent and presenting an offer and writing up an offer and buying an R2 lot, which eventually I found out what it meant. And it was a fun journey down a road that I think that if I knew what I was doing, I would never have traveled.
Okay. Well, so it's a long way from there. So, Michael, what we really want to talk about is marketing. Can you tell us from your perspective, what is marketing, why do we need it, and perhaps you can give us some examples of companies or people that do a good job at marketing?
Sure. Well, what is marketing? Marketing is oxygen and water to business. Without it, business can't sustain. I think the company that I admire more than a lot of the other ones that market, and I admire them because they have the willingness to just spend as much as they can spend and spend it in a way that causes the consumer to not realize it's them spending it, and that's Geico. I think anytime you can say to yourself as a business that you have spent as much as you physically can spend and can't spend any more, but yet still want to, I think that's a great leader right there.
Wow, Geico, that's kind of surprising. I would have expected you to say Apple.
I like Geico because I like the idea of what they do with their cluster marketing and how they perform within that, because at the end of the day, marketing isn't about presenting a single item for sale. It's presenting multiple items for sale, even though that multiple items could be singular, and causing the consumer to react to it in a way that causes the consumer to exchange something that they have for that product. And Geico just has learned and taught us that they can do that at great detail and great lengths. And it's a lesson that we should all aspire to do. Of course, we don't have the billions of dollars that they do, or the $1 billion that they do on an annual basis. However, if I always ask my coaching students, because I spend a lot of money in marketing myself, if you couldn't fail, if the failure was erased from the equation, what would you do? Well, the simple answer has to be market and market and market and market. Because a consumer is born every day, and yesterday's non-prospect is today's prospect, and we have to be out there marketing for them. No matter what we sell, we can be selling hamburgers or we can be selling the idea of buying houses. No one's going to find you until you give them the roadmap back to you and cause them to actually want to get on that road and say hello.
Well, talk to us a little bit about marketing systems that are generally available to real estate investors.
Well, I think that there are several. I wrote a book on 101 different ways to market as a real estate investor, so I know that there are at least 102 because there's a secret one at the end of the book. And for the most part, if we look at the average new investor has one, and they call that a bandit sign, or direct mail, which is great. They'll move into maybe some cold calling or cold greeting, working their center of influence, and maybe they'll do a billboard, maybe they'll do a car wrap, maybe they'll do some TV, radio, newspaper, TV, maybe they'll do some infomercials. However, there's a lot of community awareness type marketing that can be done, and done right and done responsibly, marketing is very successful. Even done wrong, marketing is extremely successful, and it's just more costly than the marketing that's done right. And without it, a business can't survive. So
you've got bandit signs, and on the real estate side, you've got cold calling, right? I mean, that is a form of marketing.
That is a form of marketing. You have cold greeting. I always tell people, especially if they're doing a lot of, if they want to do a lot of marketing, but they don't have a lot of money to spend on marketing, then they have to do a lot of sweat marketing, which is cold greeting, going up to strangers and saying hello, marketing to their center of influence, everybody in their cell phone, all those phone numbers, telling folks after careful consideration and a lot of thought, I've become a real estate investor, and who do you know that's looking to buy a house or sell a house? Cold calling, there's several prospect groups that you can cold call that are great. The easiest one is someone who has a house for sale, and they're advertising that fact. Second easiest one is someone who has a house for rent. It's a vacant rental, and converting that prospect into a seller instead of just a landlord renter or a landlord looking for a renter. But then you have your open houses that are open for like garage sales, which is a great prospect group. And at the end of the day, you can cold call open, and just cold call cold. And I know that out of every 100 people you talk to, one of them is going to raise their hand and say, yes, I have a property to sell. And when you get 9 of those, I know that you're going to buy a house, and I know you can talk to 16 of those an hour. So if you do the math on that, somewhere around 54 hours or so, if that was your only avenue of marketing, you'll buy a house. And
but a brutal method.
Yeah,
I don't think anybody can sustain that type, because you've also got to do the fulfillment aspect of it.
Right.
And there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in those rejections that not everybody can handle.
Not everybody. And quite frankly, and I hate saying it, but our business isn't for everybody, and it shouldn't be for everybody. If it were, then it wouldn't be as rewarding as it is. If everybody could do it, the level of reward that we realize as real estate investors wouldn't be as extreme as it is.
So what you were saying there really is it's a numbers game.
It is absolutely a numbers game. Our job is to present ourselves in a fashion that causes someone and I call them Horseshack from Welcome Back Carter, to raise their hand in a way that causes us to notice that, yes, you are a motivated person. Because we can't create motivation. That's one of the things that a lot of people think they can do. Is, through all the things that I do, I can create motivation. No, you can't. You can create unreasonable motivation. So if someone they own a home, and if I wanted to buy that home from them and they weren't motivated to sell it, I could offer them a substantial amount more than the home was worth to cause them to sell it, which would be unreasonable motivation. But I can't. So if I can't create motivation, all I can do is be there when motivation is there. So, which is why we multiple touch folks. Well, you can't just touch one time, because that would be kind of crazy. You multiple touch them, and which we use with cluster marketing. Mm-hmm. And when they decide to raise their hand like Horseshack and say, pick me, I'm ready to go. You're there to buy a house.
How did you get started with yellow letters then? Can you talk a little bit about that?
It was so friggin' accidental. You know what? There's this thing about you don't know what you know, and then you know what you don't know, and then you know what you know, and all that kind of stuff. Well, I don't know at what point I knew yellow letters. But at some point it happened. But and I wasn't the inventor of a yellow letter. There's a couple that's the inventor of yellow letter. But
for those that don't, we're assuming that people know what a yellow letter is. Essentially, it's a yellow. It looks like a yellow legal pad that someone has scribbled down. It looks like they've handwritten that note, right? That's the gist of a yellow letter,
right?
Correct.
Handwritten. Yeah. Note in a handwritten envelope, and it looks like mom sent you a little birthday card in the mail.
Yep.
Obviously, you're going to open it, and if the message is correct, you're going to respond to it, assuming that you're a prospect in the first place.
Yep.
But after buying a couple hundred houses and using it as one of my marketing tools, people started coming to me and wanted the unfair advantage. Well, how do I do that too, kind of stuff, which is kind of nice. And so we started slowly helping folks. And then one day I decided I was going to make a business out of it. And proudly we can say we are the largest company of what we do in the United States, helping real estate investors find opportunity responsibly and predictably, which I think is the most important key. Is when you can do something and results going to happen time and time again, that's nice.
And it's about consistency and persistency.
It is. And the yellow letter isn't the catch-all, save-all, help-all. It's just one of the tools, the many tools we use in the marketing program. It happens to be, if I were going to use a baseball team analogy, it happens to be the guy that hits fourth. It's going to hit the grand slam, bring everything home. But
so let me ask you then, if we're talking about direct mails, which could involve postcards or letters,
and the yellow letters,
what is the typical response rate to a direct marketing piece, and also what is the response rate to a yellow letter?
Sure, I personally see. And before I'm going to answer what I see, I'm going to break out the different types or the 6 types of pieces of mail I send out. The first piece of mail that I'm going to send out to somebody is a small text postcard. It's a postcard. It's not pictorial, so it doesn't have pictures on it. It has text on it, like you typed on it. And that one's going to pull back about 1.56%. And that's historical. We have embedded commands and we have call to actions within the mail piece that causes the prospect to raise their hand and say, yes, let's go. Then the second piece is going to be the yellow letter, which is, and there's 2 types of the yellow letter that we'll send out. One is a very generic one, and one is a very filtered one. The filtered one's going to get a little over 2%. The generic one is going to get 5, 8, sometimes 12%, and I've seen customers tell me they've gotten 25 to 50%.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
That rate is that's kind of like finding the $50 bill on the street. You kind of get lucky if you get that. That's not something that you can predict. But sometimes the prospect group, they haven't received it before, so that it helps. And then the third piece I send out is a large postcard, and that postcard's going to get a little bit less than the 1.56. And then we send out a professional letter. So just like if you received a letter from AT&T, so it's real professional. And then the fifth piece is a greeting card. Depending on what time of year, it could be a 4th of July card. It could be a Happy Mother's Day card. It could be a New Year's card. It could whatever the day is. And then the last piece is a zip letter, which tantamount looks like a check's coming in the mail from the government. And when you put all those together, your response rate, really you're going to be between 1.56 and somewhere around 4%. And in the direct mail business, because we're mailing it to a prospect that can perform, which is the key component over what a lot of folks do in the direct mail business. A lot of folks just mail stuff out.
Right.
They don't know if their consumer that they're mailing to is actually
even qualified, right? Yeah.
Right. They have to be qualified. So if they're not qualified, it's just wasted dollars on marketing. And so it works well. And the reason for cluster marketing is much like what Coca-Cola does. It's a great company, and they have 6 bottled waters. And I know inside of those bottled waters, those bottles of water, the water is the same, or at least similar, but it's water. And they have learned that some people like short, square bottles, and some people like tall, skinny blue bottles, and some people like fat, chubby blue bottles and red bottles, and they name them all kinds of different names. And the reality, again, is it's water. But it's what we call cluster marketing, much like what you would see if you went to the mall to buy some clothes. There's all kinds of clothing stores and what have you. They know that if they group product together, that the consumer will be more apt to buy something from that group than if they didn't group that product together. So we see that in fast food, where there'll be one fast food place on the corner and another fast food place right next to them. Those 2 fast food restaurants will make more money together than if only one of them were there. Well, in the marketing business, when we use cluster marketing and direct mail, we know the same thing's occurring. And more so, if I'm an investor and I'm not using what we call cluster marketing, and I'm sending the same piece over and over and over again, which is what we're taught to do. From a consumer's perspective, if 2 investors, one is using cluster marketing, one is not using cluster marketing, they believe at the end of the day that 7 people are marketing to them, but where there's only actually 2.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm the person using cluster marketing, I have a much greater chance of getting the attention, because one of the things we had found out a long time ago that everybody doesn't like red, everybody doesn't like blue, everybody doesn't like brown, and we have to speak to what the consumer likes and what they're going to receive and accept, and so it cluster works, and we should all do it.
This is what we talk to our agents all the time. It's an issue of you have to have it's an analogy to fishing,
right.
Which, snapper is going to bite on a small hook, and grouper they don't mind biting on a big hook, but they want a big piece of fish. So there's a lot of different lines you throw out. You don't know whether you're going to catch a snapper or a grouper or a shark or whatever it is going to be, but you have to rig different poles to make sure that you're going to catch something, as opposed to if the snapper aren't biting, you don't catch anything, you go home empty and you starve.
Right.
But so cluster marketing essentially is you're hitting the same folks with different. Just to define for the listeners, you're hitting the same list, but you're hitting them with different pieces and different types of mail. Correct?
Right, and you're keeping your message similar. So we're not building on a message. A lot of folks try to build on a message, like I marketed to you last month, so that should make this month's piece more important. So we don't build on, but we use similar message. And we understand what colors work, what colors of paper, what colors of ink, what colors of ink on parts of the paper work better than not. So at the end of the day, we can have the unfair advantage, because that's ultimately what we're looking for, especially in a marketplace like ours, which is becoming very competitive. And so it works well.
And just so we're clear, so you're sending these marketing pieces to people who own properties who might want to sell those properties.
They may not have the motivation to sell, but there's all kinds of, when we look at what a prospect looks like. I mean, are they short people, tall people, skinny people, large people? But one of the things we know when we send out to somebody that's a prospect, especially if we're in the marketing game of investing in property and buying it at a discount, because that's what most investors want. That discount equates to a prospect that has equity in their property. And so for whatever reason, they have either cashed into equity or over time created equity through a pay down of mortgage and an appreciation of property worth. They now have an equity base that's sufficient for an investor to say, yes, okay, I can buy their property, because we're trying to buy the property at a percentage off of value. And so we market to that group, and inside of that group there are two main groups, and inside of those two main groups lie all the other subgroups. And so and I'm sure you've heard words like probate and inherited lists and FSBO lists and code violations things and all these subgroups lists. The reality is they must have equity in order to be the true defining prospect. So if someone was going to say, I want to market to all the equity owners in my city, well, they would then be up marketing to all the divorcees in the city, all the probates in the city, all the code violations, all the expired listings, all the FSBOs, all the absentee owners that have a vacant unit, those kinds of things, because everybody's within those two sublists. So, the advantage to the consumer in using an investor who buys property is tremendous. It's a long way away from having no advantage. The advantage is great, as long as the investor can relay and portray that advantage to the consumer accurately, the consumer can justify selling their property at a discount as they compare that sell to a traditional sell using a real estate professional.
Okay. And so you're finding these subset lists, and whether it be probate or evictions or whatever it might be, and then you're finding that would indicate that there's enough equity. In other words, the mortgage is old enough without additional mortgages that they're targeted at that point, and that those are the people that go on the list that you're hitting.
Correct. And we have in the world today, because of algorithms and data sets, we now know or have a good indication of who are those folks that have an equity base in their property. Mm-hmm. Because someone that's over leveraged could be a prospect, but it would be only a prospect to someone who's doing shorts or something along those lines. If we're an equity investor, which most investors need to be in order to be a wholesaler or a flipper or what have you, we can find those folks nowadays and offer those folks a solution that is an absolutely positive option for them.
Tell me about the biggest mistakes that you see investors make in the marketing game.
The
direct marketing game.
They don't market enough, and they don't market consistently. So it's like trying to work out and go on a diet. Well, so the first day we're conscientious of what we do, so we drink more water, we drink less this, and, we go to the gym, and, the next day we're a little sore from the first day, and then all of a sudden someone brings over pizza, and oh my goodness, that sounds so good. And so maybe we'll just have a small slice of pizza, and then the third day, we're back at our same old routine again. Well, we really do need to be marketing consistently, and force ourselves to be at a marketing rate that causes success. And I understand that because I can raise my hand on wanting to do this as well. I understand that a nice luxury dinner or a nice luxury vacation or the luxuries of life are important. But if they're taking away from the marketing dollars that we can spend to find a prospect that would in turn ultimately present a better opportunity than buying the thick steak at the nice restaurant, well, we ought to cut back what we're doing personally so we can market more. But it's markets consistently in marketing, and
consistency and persistency. Then people are not consistent; they're not persistent.
Yeah, and then the second worst mistake or biggest mistake they make is they don't know what they're doing in the first place.
That sounds like a lot of people.
Well, and I bless their soul, because I'd rather have someone that doesn't know what they're doing but wants to, than someone that doesn't want to but knows what they're doing. Because I can teach the person that has a desire, to do it right. I can't teach someone who doesn't have a desire do anything. But they don't know what they're doing, and that's the sad part about it all. Is, it's not broken. We know what works. It's working very well, and we just have to keep following the program.
Are there any secrets or tips that you can impart to people in marketing that they should be doing that would be a little bit of a shortcut to help people who are just getting started with that?
Yeah, probably the biggest secret or tip, and it shouldn't be a secret, but it seems like it is. And quite frankly, that is being prepared for what's going to happen once you market. And, we have lead generation, we have lead capture, and we have lead fulfillment. And they all kind of have to work in a circle. Without lead generation, you can't have lead capture. Without lead capture, you can't have lead fulfillment, and you can't have, all of them. Well, folks don't answer their phone, or they don't know how to answer their phone, or they outsource their answering of their phone. Well, that would be like me needing brain surgery, and my doctor outsourcing my brain surgery to somebody else. Well, no, you have to be there to perform the tasks that you've decided that you want to do in life. And so learn how to answer the phone, understand embedded commands, mimicking, pacing, neurolinguistics, positive, negative reinforcements, and reinforcements, and understand that there's a dialogue that happens with folks that causes them to be comfortable and confident that we are, in fact, their solution. I always tell folks that, and I ask everybody, and I've yet to have anybody say that they do this, but I ask everybody, I said, do you order 2 pizzas, one from 2 different companies, just to confirm that a pizza would be delivered when you wanted it? And no one's ever said, no, I don't ever order 2 pizzas from 2 different companies. I said, well, why? And they say, well, because I know when I call and order the pizza, I'm certain that they're going to deliver it. And I said, well, so why is it the seller is calling 2 investors to sell their house? What do you think that reason is? And they look at me kind of silly, and I said, it's because we haven't created urgency, and we haven't solved the problem for the seller, with that urgency. So if a seller called me, they wouldn't ever call anybody else, no matter who's marketing to them, because I'm going to solve their problem. I'm going to use phrases like, when I come out and buy your house tomorrow at 2 o'clock, instead of using phrases like, I'll stop by sometime this week. So they can stop looking for their pizza because they know their pizza's on its way. And I think that is the biggest mistake that investors make, is they just don't understand how to create urgency in the dialogue that they have to have with the consumer, and how to treat it.
Yeah, that's that neuro-linguistic, psychological positioning of how you guide a conversation to have it end the way you want it to end.
You know, negotiating, and I'll beat this one to unfortunately too much, but negotiation isn't two people talking. Negotiation is two people listening. And when we as negotiators, because that's what we do in all aspects of life, we as negotiators, when we can negotiate our thought process and make it owned by the person we're negotiating with as their thought process, it becomes much easier for them to agree with themselves than to agree with us. And if we don't do that, then what we're trying to accomplish is telling a consumer that my program is better because of X, Y, and Z. Well, that's the wrong way to negotiate. We have to negotiate, create win-wins for the consumer, solve their problem, explain why our program is better than another program that they have the opportunity of using, and let them then own our program, be able to communicate our program freely, and then when they do, we can agree with them to buy their house, rather than
So essentially what you're saying is just getting the fish on the hook is only part of the battle, because you really have to get it into the boat. And the people will say, well, I failed with that. I didn't get any business out of that. Well, heck, they might have gotten 10 pieces or 10 responses that were legitimate prospects, but because they didn't understand how to communicate effectively, they didn't. It was their own fault. The marketing system worked.
I would rather not have to use a hook. I would rather just have fish around my boat, and one of them jump in my boat and say, hey, this is where I'm supposed to be. I understand it. It's the best opportunity for me. I'm jumping in the boat.
So let me ask you a question. You spoke a little bit about houses, but what about commercial property or multifamily? Is there any difference in the tactics that you use?
Well, because they tend to be more sophisticated.
Exactly.
Yeah, they're not individuals. They tend to be corporations, and so do you engage in that sort of thing, Michael?
So when we look at multifamily, we're looking at under 4 units, and that's all residential stuff. So for those folks, we're going to market to them just like we would market to a single family.
Gotcha. So you guys really don't engage much on the commercial, the multifamily, larger than 4 units, then?
And if I were, then I wouldn't hit with all 6 pieces of mail. I would hit with multiple pieces of mail, but they would mainly be professional pieces of mail. And I wouldn't build on one piece after the next piece. So I wouldn't refer back to, well, I talked to you yesterday in this direct mail piece. But they would be more professional looking. One of the beauties of a yellow letter, and one of the reasons it works so well, is it looks like I sat down at Starbucks and had a cup of coffee and wrote you a note.
Right.
Corporate America, that's not going to perform well with, and we know that. And corporate America wants the reason and how we're going to solve their problem. So it's going to require some more professional ad copy about how we can solve their problem, and fall forward to that. But it's still about repeat and rinse and repeat again.
Yeah, persistent, consistent, and persistent.
Yeah, it's I hate saying it. real estate investing, irrespective of what level you're at, and we're going to buy hundreds of houses this year. Real estate investing, irrespective of where you're at, requires consistency. And you know, if I could tell someone who was brand new in the business something not to do, and that would be, don't jump in before you're capable of staying in. You know, people, you know, they want to run the marathon the first day. Well, that's going to be difficult to do unless the days preceding that first day you've practiced running the marathon. But if you're a new investor and you want to get into the investment game, well, let's make sure that you have enough capital to stick into that marathon, to keep running it, to keep going at it, and fight your way through it, because it's a rough road in the beginning. And
no doubt.
Once you have your aha moments, you know, it's not unlikely for us to be buying at 55 to 60% of value. Once you have some aha moments and have some reward and understand how you can duplicate that predictably, and just not by luck, although I think luck is somewhat of a manifestation of doing. But when you can duplicate it predictably, and now you can do it again. But you have to be in the game long enough to understand that. So,
right, yeah, and you're talking about, you know, newbies trying to get started, and, you know, we continually talk not only to newbie investors but agents that are starting and whatnot, and we're telling them that, you know, they're paralyzed with fear in terms of getting started. How do you start? And we tell them, I mean, the only way you can understand, because you're going to make mistakes, the only way you understand how not to get punched in the nose is to get punched in the nose.
Right.
So, you know, if and everybody's going to have different tactics that are going to work for them. But you're talking about the newbie folks that are getting in, or even the folks that haven't really perfected a marketing system yet. Is there one resource or a book or a seminar or something that you would recommend people to that would help them ramp up their marketing efforts and be more consistent and persistent in their marketing efforts? Is there something out there like that, Michael, you would recommend to them?
Gosh, I don't know if there is a resource that would hold their hand for them. I know at Yellow Letters we do a lot of hand holding, and we help folks out a lot. And one of the nice things about what we do is we're just not the largest direct mail company for real estate investors. We are real estate investors, and so we can hold your hand pretty tight, kind of stuff. But I don't know if there's an infrastructure out there that could be the catch-all, do-all.
Michael,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. So I was just going to ask you then, how could people reach you if they wanted to get more information?
You know, if someone wanted to continue a conversation about marketing and how to buy houses for profit, for massive profits, I use the word, I'm not a passive investor, I am a massive investor. And if someone wants to be a massive investor,
does that mean you weigh a lot, or
what it means is I make a lot per transaction.
Okay.
And
even his jokes, you have to sometimes you just have to pretend it didn't happen.
and I do a lot of transactions, and so like this week alone, what is it, Wednesday? And although it's hard to say dates on podcast kinds of stuff, we'll end the week with probably 12 transactions that we've purchased, and on average, we're going to make $28,000 per transaction. And so if you do 12 times 28, well, that's a bucket load of money. It's a lot more money than most people make in a year, and we're going to do that in a week. So if someone wanted to get a hold of me and understand how to do that at a level that causes massive success, I would just invite them to jump onto yellowletters.com and find their way to us, and we'll take it from there. And again, real estate investing isn't easy and it isn't difficult. It's like most other things. Until you learn how to do it, it's extremely hard. And then once you learn how to do it, it's extremely less hard. So
it's really about copying others, seeing what their systems are, and then just directing it to your business.
Well, yeah, and I don't know who coined the phrase that just hang around people that are successful, kind of thing. Well, if I was new in business, I'd want to hang around the guys and the gals who were already successful and do what they did, eat what they did. Go back to the, for everybody who knows who Roger Bannister is, go back to that day where, here's the first guy that ran the sub-4-minute mile. And, the next year there was like 23 people that did the same thing. Well, they just ate what Roger ate, and they worked out like Roger worked out. And then they had the belief that, yes, it could be done. Well, if you want to be a real estate investor, know that it can be done. Seek out the folks that are actually doing it and eat what they eat, work out like they work out, do what they do. And ultimately, you're going to be the Roger Bannister who runs the sub-4-minute mile in the real estate business. And it's pretty simple.
Awesome advice, Michael. I really, Steve and I appreciate the time that you spent with us today. Is there anything else before we wrap up today?
No, I appreciate you guys asking me on. These are fun times. One of the things that I try to do the most, and it's something I strive for, and that is to take the guy or the gal who really, really, really needs success. Because not everybody needs success, but there are those of us that need success, and teach them how to be successful. I think for me that's a pretty cool day. So
awesome. Well, Michael, thank you very much. We learned a lot, and we're sure our guests will learn a lot also. And thank you for being with us.
I enjoyed it. Thank you for asking me.
All right, buddy. Have a good day.
You too.
Thanks for listening to the Michael Quarles Real Estate Show. Get more info and stay in touch at michaelquarles.com.